The alien convict threw a sucker punch that connected with Austin's jaw, not knowing that bullying the lone human prisoner would be the greatest mistake of his life. 32-year-old Austin Hall winced in pain as the hulking Barzan convict named Vega struck him across the face. The blow sent Austin staggering back against the cold metal wall of their cramped shared cell in the notorious Baran maximum security prison. Austin had been sentenced to 10 years in this hellish alien penitentiary on the planet Zelos for assaulting a Barzan dignitary in self-defense. The corrupt alien court had dismissed Austin's claim that the dignitary started the confrontation by shoving the human first. No one would take a lowly human's word over a powerful Barzan official's testimony. With the heavy cell door slamming shut, trapping Austin with his violent alien cellmate, the former space marine quickly realized he faced a decade-long battle for survival in this hostile environment filled with Barzan criminals who despised humans. As Austin struggled back to his feet, wiping a trickle of blood from his split lip, he saw the smug look on Vega's brutish face. The Barzan clearly expected the puny human to submit after a single hit, but Austin knew that he couldn't back down, not just for his own safety and pride, but for the reputation of his entire species. If word got around that a human could be so easily cowed, every other alien inmate would be lining up for their turn to torment him. In here, perceived weakness was an open invitation for abuse, and if Austin didn't stand up for himself now, he'd be nothing but a punching bag for the next 10 years. He'd be letting down humanity if he gave these alien bullies the satisfaction of defeating him. No, Austin decided, he wouldn't give Vega that pleasure. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Austin fixed his cellmate with a defiant glare and raised his fists, making it clear that he was ready to fight back. He'd teach this alien thug not to underestimate a human and prove that his species wasn't to be trifled with even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. The Barzan had no idea who he was messing with, no idea of a human's strength, willpower, and capacity for violence when threatened. Austin would show him the hard way and make sure these aliens never bullied another human again. It was time to tap into that indomitable human spirit that had allowed his ancestors to conquer Earth and his fellow space marines to tame the stars. Even if it meant painting every inch of this cell with alien blood, Austin would do whatever it took to survive this ordeal with his dignity and humanity intact. And so, with a primal roar, Austin launched himself at the shocked Barzan, determined to teach Vega and every other alien in this godforsaken prison a lesson they'd never forget. Over the days that followed, Austin quickly fell into the grim routine of life in Baran Maximum Security Prison. Wake up, choke down some foul-tasting nutrient slop, and spend hours toiling away in the prison's industrial workshops under the watchful eyes of heavily armed Barzan guards. The work was grueling and monotonous, but it still beat being confined to a cell with Vega. The hulking alien convict never missed a chance to torment his human cellmate. He would shoulder-check Austin when they passed each other in the narrow hallway. He'd accidentally spill his drink on Austin's bed. During meals, Vega would reach over and snatch choice morsels off Austin's tray, daring him with a sneer to object. Austin gritted his teeth and endured the constant harassment stoically. His Space Marine instructors had taught him the importance of picking his battles. He couldn't let Vega goad him into a fight. The guards were just looking for an excuse to crack down on the lone human troublemaker. He had to stay focused on surviving his sentence day by day. One sweltering afternoon, Austin returned to his cell to find Vega absent. Probably off shaking down some other poor bastard, Austin figured. He welcomed the rare moment of privacy and solitude. Just as Austin sat down on his bunk, a looming shadow filled the cell doorway. He looked up to see not Vega, but 6 of the brute's lackeys all wearing predatory grins. "Well, ain't this a treat, boys?" sneered the apparent ringleader, a scarred Barzan with cauliflower ears. "Looks like the little monkey is all alone in his cage." The Barzan spread out to encircle him, their body language dripping with hostile intent. "Shano, I think it's time someone taught this human his proper place," remarked another lackey, smashing a fist into his palm. "Remind him that Barzans are the superior species. Always have been, always will be." Only thing humans are good for is licking our boots, spat a third. Austin clenched his fists at his sides but held his tongue. He wouldn't let himself be baited. Austin met the alien's gaze evenly. I've got nothing to say to gutter scum like you. The Barzan's eyes flashed with rage. Looks like this monkey needs a lesson in respect. The ringleader swung a haymaker at Austin's face, a blow intended to shake his teeth loose. But Austin had seen it coming from a mile away. He ducked underneath the wild punch and drove his elbow into the Barzan's exposed ribcage. The alien folded like an accordion, wheezing. The other five, enraged at seeing their leader dropped so easily, let out howls of fury and charged at Austin as one. What followed was a whirlwind of violence within the claustrophobic confines of the prison cell. Austin fell back on his close-quarters combat training, engaging multiple opponents in a brutal dance of precision strikes and flowing evasion. He caught the first attacker with a palm-heel strike to the chin that snapped the Barzan's head back. The second he dropped with a knife-hand chop to the side of the neck. The third managed to tackle Austin against the cell wall. They grappled fiercely before Austin trapped the snarling alien in a chokehold and squeezed until he went limp. The remaining three lackeys piled on, turning the fight into a desperate, grappling melee. Punches and kicks thudded into flesh, bones crunched, blood splattered the walls. Austin felt himself tiring, even as he wrenched a lackey's arm behind his back until the joint popped wetly. Just as it seemed the human warrior might be overwhelmed, a harsh buzzing cut through the cacophony of the brawl. "Break it up, scum!" roared an amplified voice. A rapid response team of guards stormed into the cell. With ruthless efficiency, they employed shock batons and stun blasts to subdue the combatants. In seconds, Austin and the groaning, battered Barzan lackeys were dragged apart and restrained. Panting for breath, his face bruised and bloody, Austin looked up from where a guard had forced him to his knees. There, framed in the cell doorway, stood Vega. The Barzan Alpha's eyes smoldered with a mixture of outrage and something almost like respect. Austin met Vega's gaze unflinchingly, even as a guard jammed a shock baton under his chin. In that shared look was an unspoken message. I'm not just another victim. I won't make this easy for you. As the response team hauled the battered lackeys away to the infirmary, Austin knew that while this battle was over, his war for survival in Bahran maximum security prison was just beginning. But he would keep fighting, no matter what it took. He would show these alien convicts the depths of human resolve and tenacity. Even if it meant painting every inch of this cell with alien blood. As the adrenaline from the brawl faded, the reality of Austin's situation set in. The guards dragged him, still bleeding and bruised, to the solitary confinement wing of the prison. They tossed him roughly into a tiny, dank cell, slamming the heavy metal door behind him with a resounding clang. Austin found himself in a space barely larger than a closet, with nothing but a thin, stained mattress on the concrete floor and a rudimentary toilet in the corner. The walls seemed to close in on him, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional drip of water from the leaky ceiling. As the hours crawled by, Austin's physical pain was gradually eclipsed by the psychological toll of isolation. With no windows to let in sunlight and no way to track the passage of time, he felt himself starting to drift, his thoughts turning darker. He began to second-guess his actions. Had fighting back against Vega's lackeys been worth it? Had he just condemned himself to an even more miserable existence within the confines of this hellhole? Days blurred together, marked only by the arrival of tasteless meal trays shoved through a slot in the door. Austin felt his grip on reality starting to slip, the solitude gnawing at his sanity. On what he estimated to be the fourth day, the cell door suddenly swung open, blinding Austin with the harsh glare of the corridor lights. A squad of heavily armed guards stood in the doorway. "On your feet, human," barked the lead guard. "Warden wants to see you." Austin, his muscles stiff from disuse, struggled to stand. The guards roughly snapped restraints around his wrists before marching him through the maze-like halls of the prison. They ended up in front of a heavy, reinforced door emblazoned with the warden's name. One of the guards knocked sharply. A gruff voice from within called, "Enter!" Inside, the warden, a grizzled old Barzan with a jagged scar bisecting his face, sat behind a massive desk. He regarded Austin with a mixture of contempt and curiosity, as if he were a particularly interesting insect. Austin remained silent, meeting the warden's gaze steadily. "Your cellmate, Vega, has issued a formal challenge. A fight, one-on-one, in the prison yard. Winner earns the respect of the other inmates." The warden leaned forward, his scarred face twisting into a sneer. "Of course you can refuse. No one would blame you for cowering away from a Barzan warrior. But know this. If you do, you'll be branded a coward. And in here, cowards are nothing more than playthings for the strong." Austin digested this information, his mind racing. He knew Vega would be a formidable opponent, but this challenge was an opportunity, a chance to establish himself in the brutal hierarchy of the prison. "I accept," Austin said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. The warden's eyebrows rose in surprise. Then he let out a barking laugh. "Bold move, human. The fight will happen tomorrow at high sun. May the gods have mercy on you." With that, the guards dragged Austin back to his cell. As they passed through the prison yard, he caught a glimpse of Vega, surrounded by his lackeys. The massive Barzan looked confident, even eager, his eyes glinting with malice as they met Austin's. Back in his cell, Austin began to prepare himself mentally for the battle to come. He knew it would be the fight of his life, but he was determined to come out on top, to prove to Vega, to the other inmates, and to himself that he was more than just a punching bag. He was a warrior, a survivor, and he would not be broken. As the sun rose over the grim walls of Baran Maximum Security Prison, Austin prepared himself for the fight of his life. The day had finally arrived, his one-on-one showdown with Vega, the hulking Barzan Alpha who had tormented him since his first day in this hellhole. The entire prison buzzed with anticipation. Inmates gathered in the yard, forming a makeshift arena around the two combatants. Vega stood across from Austin, his massive frame rippling with muscle, his fangs bared in a menacing grin. He radiated confidence, certain that his brute strength would crush the puny human. But Austin was no ordinary human. Years of rigorous Space Marine training had honed his body and mind into a weapon. He may have looked small and wiry next to the towering Barzan, but his balanced stance and focused gaze revealed the discipline and skill of a true warrior. A guttural roar went up from the crowd as the signal to begin was given. Vega charged forward like an enraged bull, intending to overwhelm Austin with sheer force. Austin held his ground until the last second, then sidestepped the rush with a fluid grace. As Vega barreled past, Austin snapped out a quick jab that connected solidly with the Barzan's ribs. Vega grunted in surprise and pain, his momentum carrying him several steps before he could whirl around to face Austin again. His eyes blazed with fury at being caught off guard by the human's speed. With an ear-splitting bellow, Vega launched into a flurry of powerful strikes, his massive fists whistling through the air. But Austin was a flowing river to Vega's raging fire. He dodged and deflected each blow with an economy of motion, always a hair's breadth ahead of the Barzan's attacks. Frustration mounting, Vega redoubled his efforts, putting more and more power behind each swing. But this only served to tire him out faster. Austin, conserving his energy, waited patiently for his moment. It came when Vega, overextending on a particularly forceful punch, left himself open for a split second. Austin seized the opportunity, stepping inside Vega's guard and launching a devastating uppercut that connected squarely with the Barzan's jaw. Vega's head snapped back, spittle and blood flying from his mouth. He staggered, his legs turning to rubber beneath him. Austin pressed his advantage, unleashing a rapid series of precision strikes to Vega's vital points, solar plexus, throat, temple. The combination proved too much for even Vega's hardy Barzan physiology. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed to the ground, out cold before he even hit the dirt. For a moment, the yard was dead silent. Then a deafening roar erupted from the gathered inmates. They had just witnessed the impossible. a human defeating a Barzan warrior in single combat. As Austin stood over Vega's unconscious form, chest heaving, fists still clenched, the magnitude of his victory began to sink in. He had proven himself, earned the respect of every being in this prison. But even as the rush of triumph surged through his veins, Austin felt a chill of apprehension. He had just painted a huge target on his back. Every tough guy in here would be gunning for him now, eager to take down the human who had toppled their champion. But for now, as the other inmates surged forward to congratulate him, slapping his back and shouting his name, Austin allowed himself a moment to savor his victory. He had shown these aliens what a human was capable of, and he would keep showing them, no matter what it took. In the days after his triumph over Vega, Austin found that his status within the prison had changed drastically. As he walked the corridors, inmates who had once sneered at him or looked away now met his gaze with a mix of respect and fear. Some nodded their heads in acknowledgement, while others openly congratulated him on his victory. At first, Austin tried to brush off the attention. He wasn't comfortable with the idea of being some kind of prison celebrity. All he wanted was to serve his time and get out alive. But as the days went on, he realized that his newfound reputation could be a valuable tool in this harsh environment. One day, as he sat alone in the mess hall, picking at his tasteless meal, a group of Vega's former lackeys approached his table. Austin tensed, ready for a confrontation, but to his surprise, their leader, a burly Barzan with a scar across his snout, held out his hand. "Name's Crone," he grunted. "We just wanted to say what you did to Vega. That was impressive. We've never seen anyone take him down like that, especially not a human." Austin eyed the proffered hand warily before shaking it. "Thanks, I guess." Crone leaned in closer. "Look, we know you're not the type to join a gang, but having allies in here, it's important. We've got your back from now on." Austin was taken aback by the offer. He'd never expected Vega's crew to come to him like this, but as he considered it, he realized that Crone was right. In a place like this, he needed all the help he could get. As the days turned into weeks, Austin started to notice a change in the atmosphere of the prison. The guards seemed more on edge, quicker to reach for their stun batons at the slightest provocation. Whispers began to circulate among the inmates about something big happening, though no one seemed to know exactly what. It was Zephyr, a wiry Barzan who had become one of Austin's closest allies, who finally clued him in. They were in the exercise yard, spotting each other on the weight bench, when Zephyr glanced around furtively and lowered his voice. "Word is there's a breakout being planned," he murmured. "Some of the long-timers in the high-security wing, they say they've found a way out." Austin frowned as he helped Zephyr rack the barbell. "A prison break? That's crazy. The security here is airtight." Austin shook his head. "Our chance for what? To get shot trying to escape? No thanks." But as he lay in his bunk that night, Austin couldn't shake the thought from his mind. A prison break would be dangerous, no doubt, but it could also be an opportunity. If he played his cards right, used his influence with the other inmates. Over the next few days, Austin started to quietly investigate the rumors. He tapped his network of allies, listening for any scraps of information about the planned escape. Slowly, the pieces began to come together. The mastermind behind the plot was a notorious Barzan crime lord named Zolath. He'd been locked up in the high-security wing for decades, but apparently he'd never stopped scheming. If the rumors were true, he'd spent years carefully cultivating a loyal crew, smuggling in contraband, and searching for weaknesses in the prison's defenses. The more Austin learned, the more he realized the scale of the threat. If Zolath and his crew managed to break out, they wouldn't just disappear into the underworld. They would be out for revenge against the system that had imprisoned them. The entire Barzan sector could be thrown into chaos. Austin knew he had a choice to make. He could keep his head down, stay out of it, and hope that the guards would be able to stop the escape attempt. Or he could use his newfound influence to try to prevent it from happening in the first place. As he mulled over his options, Austin felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had never asked to be a leader, but like it or not, that was the role he had fallen into, and now The fate of not just the prison, but potentially the entire Barzan system, could rest on his next move. Gathering his resolve, Austin began to plan his next steps. He would need to be cautious to gather more intelligence before he acted. But one thing was clear. He couldn't just sit back and let this happen. He had to do something. Even if it meant risking everything he had fought so hard to gain. Austin paced the floor of his cell, his mind racing with the implications of what he had learned. A prison break, orchestrated by the notorious crime lord Drazer, was imminent. If successful, it would not only grant the galaxy's most dangerous criminals their freedom, but potentially destabilize the entire Barzan system. He couldn't let that happen. Wasting no time, Austin sought out Zephyr and a select few other inmates he had come to trust. They gathered in a secluded corner of the prison yard, speaking in hushed tones to avoid drawing unwanted attention. "Drazer's planning something big," Austin explained, his voice low and urgent. "We have to stop it." Zephyr nodded grimly. "I've heard whispers. Guards acting strange, unusual shipments coming in. Whatever he's planning, it's happening soon." The group began to pool their knowledge, piecing together a rough outline of the prison's layout and routines. They marked potential weak points in security, discussed guard rotations, and debated the best way to proceed. As they worked, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Drazer, it seemed, had been busy. With the help of corrupt guards, he had managed to smuggle in a cache of weapons and explosives, far more than would be needed for a simple escape attempt. "This isn't just a breakout," Austin realized with a sinking feeling. "It's a full-scale rebellion." The stakes had just gotten much higher. If Drazer and his followers managed to seize control of the prison, they could potentially hold the entire facility hostage, using the guards and other inmates as bargaining chips. Austin tensed, ready for a confrontation, but Vega held up his hands in a gesture of truce. "I want in," the Barzan said gruffly, "on whatever you're planning to stop Drazer." Austin eyed him warily. "Why should we trust you?" Vega's gaze hardened. "Because Drazer and I have history. He's the reason I'm in here, the reason my family is dead. I want him stopped as much as you do." Austin hesitated, weighing the sincerity in Vega's voice against the risks of trusting his former adversary. But the Barzan's knowledge of the prison's inner workings could be invaluable, and they needed all the help they could get. "Okay," Austin said finally. "You're in, but if you betray us—" "I won't," Vega promised, his voice steely with resolve. Over the next few days, the unlikely allies refined their plan. Each member of the group had a specific role to play, from creating diversions to sabotaging key systems. Austin and Vega, as the most skilled fighters, would lead the charge against Drazer himself. As the day of the planned escape drew near, the tension in the prison reached a fever pitch. Fights broke out with increasing frequency as Drazer's men grew bold and restless. The guards, sensing something amiss, cracked down hard, their stun batons and shock collars always at the ready. Austin knew they were running out of time. They had to act soon before Drazer made his move. The opportunity came during the midday meal. As inmates filed into the mess hall, Austin's team put their plan into action. Zephyr and the others staged a brawl, drawing the attention of the guards and creating a chaotic distraction. In the confusion, Austin and Vega slipped away, making their way towards the high-security wing where Drazer was housed. They moved quickly and quietly, dispatching the few guards they encountered with silent efficiency. As they approached Drazer's cell block, the sounds of fighting grew louder. Shouts and the distinctive hiss-whine of energy weapons echoed off the metal walls. They rounded a corner to find a scene of utter chaos. Drazer's men, armed with stolen blasters and makeshift weapons, were engaged in a brutal clash with a contingent of prison guards. The cramped confines of the cell block had turned the battle into a vicious close-quarters melee. Austin and Vega exchanged a quick glance, a silent understanding passing between them. Then, as one, they charged into the fray. Austin ducked under a wild swing from a prison guard, then drove his fist into the Barzan's stomach, doubling him over. Beside him, Vega grappled with one of Drazer's men. his powerful arms locked around the convict's neck. They fought their way through the press of bodies, working in tandem to take down anyone who stood in their way. Austin's martial arts skills complemented Vega's brute strength, the two moving like a well-oiled machine. But Drazer's forces were formidable, and they had the advantage of numbers. For every foe they felled, two more seemed to take their place. Austin felt the burn of a blaster bolt graze his shoulder, smelled the acrid tang of singed flesh. Still they pushed on, driven by a shared determination to stop Drazer at any cost. They knew that if they failed, if the crime lord managed to escape and unleash his forces on the unsuspecting galaxy, the consequences would be catastrophic. And so they fought, two unlikely allies standing together against a rising tide of chaos and violence, their only goal to save the lives of countless innocents they would never know. Bloodied and battered, Austin and Vega finally broke through to Drazer's cell. The crime lord was waiting for them, a stolen blaster in his hand and a cruel smile on his lips. "Well, well," he sneered, "the human and the traitor. I must say, I'm impressed you made it this far." The crime lord laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "Oh, but I am, and you're going to help me." He raised his blaster, pointing it not at Austin or Vega, but at a huddled group of prison guards and inmates cowering in the corner of the cell. "Here's what's going to happen," Drazer said, his voice dripping with malice. "You two are going to clear me a path to the hangar bay. Any interference, any attempt to stop me, and I start executing hostages. Understand?" Austin's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out. But Drazer held all the cards. With innocent lives at stake, he couldn't risk a frontal assault. Beside him, Vega tensed, a low growl building in his throat. Austin could see the rage and frustration burning in the Barzan's eyes, mirroring his own. "Okay," he said through gritted teeth. "We'll do it your way for now." Drazer's smile widened. "I knew you'd see reason. Now move." Under the crime lord's watchful gaze and the threat of his blaster, Austin and Vega had no choice but to comply. They stepped back into the chaos of the cell block, now tasked with the bitter duty of aiding their enemy's escape. Every instinct screamed at Austin to fight back, to take Drazer down no matter the cost, but the weight of the hostages' lives hung heavy on his shoulders. He couldn't gamble with their safety, even if it meant letting a monster walk free. And so, with a leaden heart and a simmering rage, he led the way towards the hangar bay. Vega, a silent, seething presence at his side. Each step was a betrayal of everything he believed in, every principle he held dear. But even as he walked, Austin's mind was working, searching for a way to turn the tables. He would play along with Drazer's game for now, but the moment an opportunity presented itself, he would seize it. No matter what it took, no matter the price he had to pay, Austin vowed that the crime lord would not escape justice. One way or another, he would see Drazer brought down. Even if it was the last thing he ever did. As Austin fought his way through the press of bodies, he found himself suddenly face to face with Drazer himself. The crime lord was a whirlwind of deadly motion, a glowing energy blade in each hand. He slashed and thrust at Austin with blinding speed, the blades humming through the air. Austin dodged and wove, narrowly avoiding the sizzling blades. He lashed out with a series of quick jabs and kicks, trying to find an opening in Drazer's defenses. But the crime lord was too fast, too skilled. His blades seemed to be everywhere at once, leaving Austin no room for error. Around them the battle raged on. The clashing of weapons and the cries of the wounded filled the air. Austin's allies grappled with Drazer's men in a brutal hand-to-hand melee. Neither side seemed to be gaining ground. Austin ducked under a slashing blade and managed to land a solid punch to Drazer's ribs. The crime lord grunted but didn't slow down. He retaliated with a flurry of strikes that forced Austin back. Then, in a lightning-fast move, Austin managed to knock one of the energy blades from Drazer's grip. It clattered to the floor, still humming. Drazer snarled in rage but didn't miss a beat. He came at Austin with renewed ferocity, his remaining blade a blur of light. Austin pressed his advantage, raining blows down on Drazer's defenses. For a moment it seemed he might actually overcome the crime lord. But then Drazor played his trump card. Austin risked a glance, and saw that Drazor's men had indeed taken the warden hostage. They held him at blaster point, ready to execute him at a word from their leader. Austin hesitated, his fist frozen in mid-strike. He couldn't let the warden die, but if he stood down, Drazor would escape. In that moment of indecision, Drazor struck. His blade flashed towards Austin's heart, too fast to dodge. But the blow never landed. Vega appeared as if from nowhere, throwing himself between Austin and the blade. It sank into his chest with a sickening thud. Vega collapsed, blood already pooling beneath him. Austin stared in shock for a heartbeat. Then a rage unlike anything he had ever known consumed him. He launched himself at Drazor with a roar of fury, raining blows on the crime lord with a berserker's strength. Drazor, taken aback by the sudden ferocity of the assault, gave ground. He tried to bring his blade to bear, but Austin was relentless. He battered aside Drazor's guard and sent the energy blade flying with a well-placed kick. Disarmed and reeling, Drazor could only raise his hands in a futile attempt to ward off Austin's attacks. The human's fist crashed into his jaw, snapping his head back. Again and again Austin struck, pouring all his grief and rage into every blow. Finally, with a devastating uppercut, Austin sent Drazor crashing to the floor. The crime lord lay still, his face a bloody ruin. As the battle died down around him, Austin rushed to Vega's side. The Barzan was still alive, but only just. His breath came in wet, ragged gasps. Austin cradled Vega's head, trying desperately to staunch the flow of blood. Vega's hand gripped his arm with surprising strength. "We did it," Austin corrected. "I couldn't have done it without you." Vega's lips twitched in a faint smile. "I was wrong about you, human. You're a true warrior, a man of honor." His grip tightened for a moment. "I'm glad I got to fight by your side." Austin bowed his head, tears mixing with the blood and sweat on his face. He had lost more than an ally. He had lost a friend. But even in his grief, he knew that Vega's sacrifice had not been in vain. Together they had stopped a great evil. They had saved countless lives. With Drazor defeated and his rebellion quashed, Austin and his allies set about restoring order to the battered prison. They freed the warden and other hostages who had been held at gunpoint, their shackles clattering to the floor as Austin unlocked them. The warden rubbed his chafed wrists, nodding gratefully to Austin before taking charge once more. Together, they rounded up the last of Drazor's men who had not fallen in battle, herding them into cells under heavy guard. Austin hauled a semi-conscious Drazor to his feet, the crime lord's head lolling, and handed him over to the warden's custody. As the adrenaline of combat drained away, exhaustion settled over Austin like a leaden cloak. His body ached from countless bruises and lacerations, each one a reminder of how close he had come to death. But more than the physical pain, it was the grief that weighed heaviest. The warden approached Austin as medics tended to the wounded. "You've done a great service today," he said, clasping Austin's shoulder. "Not just for this prison, but for the entire Barzan system. Drazor's escape would have been catastrophic." Austin met the warden's gaze, seeing a newfound respect in the grizzled Barzan's eyes. "He had help," Austin said. "None of this would have been possible without the courage of those who fought beside me, especially Vega." The warden nodded solemnly. "His sacrifice will not be forgotten, nor will your actions in uncovering the corruption that allowed this to happen. I give you my word, there will be a full investigation. Changes will be made." Austin could only nod, too drained to muster a response. The warden seemed to understand, giving Austin's shoulder a final squeeze before moving off to oversee the cleanup. In the following days, as some semblance of normalcy returned to the prison, Austin found himself grappling with conflicting emotions. Pride in what they had accomplished warred with sorrow for the lives lost. He stood beside Zephyr and the others as Vega's body was laid to rest in a small, stark ceremony. No family came to mourn the fallen Barzan. In this place, the inmates were all the family each other had. Austin stared at the freshly turned earth of the grave, his throat tight. Vega had started as his tormentor, his enemy, but in the end he had proven himself a true friend, giving his life for Austin's. The twists of fate that had brought them to that moment were staggering. As the small gathering dispersed, Zephyr fell into step beside Austin. "You know things are going to be different around here now," the Barzan said. "For all of us." Austin glanced at him questioningly. Zephyr shrugged. "You're a hero, Austin. Like it or not, people are going to look to you now." In the following weeks, Austin began to see the truth in Zephyr's words. Inmates who had once shunned or threatened him now sought him out, asking for advice, for help settling disputes. Even some of the guards, the ones not implicated in Drazer's plot, treated him with a wary respect. At first, Austin tried to deflect the attention. He had never asked to be a leader, a role model, but as he listened to the problems and fears of his fellow inmates, he began to understand the opportunity he had been given. These were beings society had discarded, tagged as irredeemable, but Austin saw the potential in them, the chance for change. If he could make a difference, even here in the bowels of Baron Maximum Security Prison, perhaps his own incarceration would mean something. So, little by little, Austin began to embrace his new role. He used his influence to defuse conflicts before they could escalate into violence. He advocated for better living conditions, for fair treatment of all inmates regardless of species or crime. And he started to push for more than just day-to-day survival. He organized classes, workshops, anything to help the inmates prepare for a life beyond these walls. The warden, true to his word, lent his support, seeing the positive changes Austin was helping to create. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, resistance from inmates and guards alike who were content with the status quo, but Austin persevered, driven by a growing sense of purpose. As the months passed, the atmosphere within the prison began to shift. Tensions eased, replaced by a tentative but growing sense of community. Inmates who had once been bitter enemies found common ground, even friendship. And at the center of it all was Austin, the human who had come to Baran as a prisoner, but who now served as its unlikeliest of guardians. His sentence stretched ahead of him still, but now it no longer felt like a burden, but an opportunity. A chance to make a real and lasting difference in the lives of those society had forgotten. As Austin's influence continued to grow, transforming the once harsh and unforgiving prison into a place of rehabilitation and hope, an unexpected visitor arrived at the gates. A stern-faced Zardonian stepped out of a sleek, official-looking shuttle, his crisp uniform bearing the insignia of the Galactic Justice Council. He strode purposefully through the prison's corridors, ignoring the curious glances from inmates and guards alike. Austin was in the midst of mediating a dispute between two rival gangs when a guard approached him saying, "Austin, there's a council representative here to see you. Says it's urgent." Intrigued and a bit wary, Austin made his way to the warden's office where the Zardonian awaited. The representative introduced himself as Krivax, his tone businesslike as he said, "Mr. Hall, the council has been monitoring your activities here with great interest. Your efforts to reform this institution have not gone unnoticed." Austin leaned back in his chair, studying Krivax. "I'm just doing what I believe is right." "And that is precisely why I'm here," Krivax said. "The council has been attempting to address the systemic issues in our prisons for years, but we've been met with resistance and corruption at every turn. But you, Mr. Hall, have managed to achieve real, tangible change." Krivax leaned forward, his eyes intense. "We want you to work with us, to help expose the corruption and bring about reform on a galactic scale. In exchange, the Council is prepared to grant you early release and a full pardon." Austin felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of freedom, but it was tempered by a sense of unease. He glanced out the window at the prison yard, where inmates were engaged in a spirited game of zero-G handball, their laughter and shouts echoing off the walls. "I'm honored by the offer," Austin said slowly, "but my work here isn't finished. If I leave now, I'm afraid all the progress we've made could unravel." Krivax nodded, his expression understanding. "I see. The Council is not in the habit of making deals, Mr. Hall. What would it take to secure your cooperation? Austin thought for a long moment, then said, I propose a compromise. Let me serve out my sentence, use that time to solidify the changes here and train a successor. In return, I ask that the Council provide resources and support to help the reforms take root and spread to other prisons. Krivax raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Hall, but your terms are acceptable. The Council will provide what you need, and in return, we expect your full cooperation in our investigation. They shook hands, sealing the agreement. As Krivax took his leave, Austin felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had a chance to make a real difference, not just in this one prison, but across the galaxy. Over the following months, Austin worked harder than ever. He mentored promising inmates and guards, teaching them the principles of compassion, fairness, and rehabilitation. He spent long hours with Krivax, sharing his insights and experiences, providing the Council with the evidence they needed to bring corrupt officials to justice. And slowly but surely, change began to ripple outward. News of the reforms at Baran Maximum Security Prison spread, inspiring similar efforts at other facilities. Austin's name became known not as a prisoner, but as a reformer, a champion of justice. As his sentence neared its end, Austin found himself reflecting on the incredible journey he had undergone. From a wrongly convicted inmate to a respected leader, he had touched countless lives and reshaped the very fabric of the prison system. He knew that challenges lay ahead, that the fight against corruption and injustice was ongoing. But he also knew that he was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge and allies he had gained, and an unshakable belief in the power of redemption. Austin stood at the threshold of his cell, his meager possessions packed into a small bag. He took a deep breath, savoring the moment. Then, with a smile, he stepped forward into the bright light of a new day, ready to begin the next chapter of his life. As he made his way through the prison corridors one last time, Austin was stopped at every turn by inmates and guards alike, all eager to say their goodbyes. There were tearful embraces from those he had mentored, those whose lives he had touched. Even the warden, usually so stoic, clasped Austin's hand with a gruff, "You've done good, son." Zephyr, his first and closest ally, pulled him into a tight hug. "Don't forget about us little people when you're out there changing the galaxy," he said with a watery grin. Austin laughed, blinking back his own tears. "Never. You all taught me more than I ever taught you." At the prison gates, a contingent of Galactic Justice Council representatives awaited, led by Krivax. The stern Zardonian's face was unreadable as Austin approached. "Mr. Hall," he said formally, "on behalf of the Council, I wish to extend our deepest gratitude for your service. Your work here has been nothing short of remarkable." Austin shook Krivax's hand. "I only did what I thought was right." "And that is precisely why we need you," Krivax said. "The Council is offering you a position, a chance to continue your reformative efforts on a galactic scale. Will you accept?" Austin glanced back at the prison, at the faces of those he was leaving behind. Then he turned to Krivax, determination burning in his eyes. "I accept." And so, with a final wave to his former home, Austin stepped into the sleek Council shuttle, ready to take on the challenges of his new role. Weeks turned into months as Austin threw himself into his work with the Council. He traveled from prison to prison, from system to system, assessing conditions and implementing reforms. It was grueling, often thankless work, but Austin poured his heart and soul into it, driven by the memory of his own experiences and the knowledge that he was making a real difference. But as he dug deeper, Austin began to uncover hints of something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface of the Council. Whispered conversations cut short when he entered a room, encrypted files that vanished before he could access them, Council members who seemed to have amassed far more wealth and power than their positions warranted. Piece by piece, a picture began to emerge of a vast web of corruption, one that seemed to permeate every level of the Council. Bribery, smuggling, even slave trading. It was a rot that went to the very core of the system Austin had pledged to serve. Austin brought his findings to Krivax, expecting shock, outrage, immediate action. But the Zardonian simply sighed, his shoulders slumping as if under a great weight. "I had hoped to spare you this knowledge," he said heavily. "The truth is, the corruption you've uncovered is not new. It's been festering for decades, perhaps longer. Many have tried to expose it, to root it out. None have succeeded." Austin felt a chill run down his spine. "Then why bring me in? Why give me this position?" Krivax met his gaze, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. "Because I believe in what you stand for, Austin. I believe that if anyone can bring about true change, it's you. But the forces arrayed against you, they are powerful, and they will stop at nothing to protect their interests." Austin set his jaw, his resolve hardening. "Then I'll just have to stop at nothing to expose them." In the weeks that followed, Austin worked feverishly to gather evidence, to build an ironclad case against the corrupt elements within the council. He barely slept, barely ate, driven by a righteous fury and a burning need for justice. But his enemies were watching, and they were closing in. Late one night, as Austin pored over a particularly damning set of documents in his office, the door burst open. A group of heavily armed mercenaries stormed in, their weapons trained on Austin's heart. Austin reacted on instinct, years of training taking over. He dove for cover, overturning his desk to create a makeshift barricade. Blaster bolts sizzled through the air, scorching the walls where he had been standing moments before. He reached for his own weapon, a small holdout blaster he had taken to carrying, and returned fire. One mercenary went down, then another. But there were too many, and they were too heavily armed. A bolt caught Austin in the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him into the wall. Another grazed his temple, leaving a trail of searing pain in its wake. As he slumped to the floor, his vision blurring, his life's blood pooling beneath him, Austin felt a strange sense of clarity wash over him. He knew, with a certainty that went to his very core, that this was the end. But even as the darkness closed in, Austin's mind raced. With fumbling fingers, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small recording device. With his last ounce of strength, he activated it, gasping out the names of those he had uncovered, the details of their crimes. He sent the recording winging into the ether, to news outlets and law enforcement agencies across the galaxy, a final desperate attempt to ensure that the truth would be known. As the mercenaries closed in, their blasters leveled at his head, Austin managed a weak, defiant smile. He had done his part, the rest was up to the galaxy. And then, with a final rattling breath, Austin Hall, the man who had changed so many lives, who had brought hope to the hopeless and light to the darkness, slipped away. In the days that followed, the galaxy reeled from the revelations Austin had unleashed. Mass protests erupted on 100 worlds, citizens demanding accountability, demanding change. The Council, unable to weather the storm of public outrage, collapsed, its members fleeing or turning on each other in desperate attempts to save themselves. But even as the old order crumbled, a new one began to take shape. The inmates Austin had mentored, the guards he had inspired, took up his mantle, both within the prisons and without. They became leaders in their own right, voices for reform and justice in a galaxy that sorely needed them. And at the center of it all was the memory of Austin Hall, the human who had given his life for what he believed in. His story spread like wildfire, became a rallying cry, a symbol of the indomitable human spirit. In his death, he had achieved perhaps his greatest victory. He had shown the galaxy that one person, no matter their species or their background, could make a difference. Change would not come easily. There would be setbacks, challenges, forces that sought to drag the galaxy back into the darkness. But always there would be those who remembered Austin Hall, who drew strength from his example. And bit by bit, day by day, the galaxy would move forward, towards a future that Austin had dreamed of, a future of justice and equality and hope. A future worth fighting for. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.